Hello, everybody. This is like in a rock star in a band. We had the warm-up team. Thanks, Dave, for getting you ready. But this is the real rock band. So you thought it was difficult to raise the money. Well, here's the bad news. That was the easy part. Now we're going to talk about how you make sure you get it from the right person and how do you build the right team. And so we're extremely lucky to have a great team of venture capitalists here who also, several of them have been entrepreneurs in their own right. So they've been on every side of the table. So we know that 50% of the success of a startup is tied to the team. So let's also see how critical is it to have the right team and the right VC to build a very big company. That's kind of the theme today. So we're going to ask each of our panelists to very shortly introduce themselves. Also mention which stage they invest in or which technology area they're, and also give us one key lesson just to get us going on what are they looking for the right VC and the right founder team combo. Amir, I'll let you start on that side.
So should we start with intros first, maybe?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just quick intro.
Great.
Short.
My name is Amit. Barry, a kid, actually grew up in Cupertino, not too far away from here. Went to Berkeley, was an engineer. Started 3 companies, and the last one was something called CardSpring. We raised venture funding from ACCEL and Greylock. We sold it to Twitter, where I ran engineering for a large part of Twitter commerce for a couple of years before taking the plunge and joined ACCEL as a partner on the early stage side. We invest in I look mostly at consumer businesses, but also a lot of fintech and frontier tech. So it's esports, VR, things on that nature. In terms of what we look for in a great team, I would say the single biggest predictor of success is just an entrepreneur who has grit and determination, but also a very strong command of the market. Products get built, but it's really the go-to-market, I think, that differentiates a lot of the winners from the losers. And so just someone who understands kind of how the chess pieces are moving and how the market has come together and the kind of landscape, how it pans out over the next few years is really what we look for.
Steve?
Yeah, so my name is Steve Schlenker. I run the US office for DN Capital, which is a firm I co-founded about 17 years ago. Have been doing investing of one sort or another since I was about 22. It's a long time back. We do seed A and B rounds, mostly Series A. Across our last 3 funds, we've had 3 companies where from the seed stage we've gotten them to worth more than $1 billion, and 2 that have gone to be worth substantially after that, immediately after us exiting. One lesson that I would leave for people, just like when you see a person with their pets, with their dog or their cat, they often start looking like each other over time. Companies and founders start looking like their personalities. So if you're trying to mold as a VC the personality of a firm, you don't want to put someone in that's going to be diametrically opposed to the personality of the CEO. You can move them and nudge them in a slight different direction, but the alignment of the senior people that are brought in by the VC in helping the CEO has to be something aligned with the personality of the CEO, otherwise the organization starts falling apart.
I'm Mike. I run the SocialStarts funds, Moment of Inception funds, and Series A. So we aim to be the very first check for remarkable companies. And at that point, we look at 4 things. The right time. Often it's a matter of, is this an idea for the moment? Is this an idea that customers, other investors are ready for? The right team. And for us, that means are these extraordinary human beings. We view entrepreneurship as a socially acceptable form of mania. We're not interested in normal people. We're interested in folks who truly believe they are the right people to do amazing things. The right tech. I think I heard from the other panel, often 20 companies will show up all saying that they are going to change the world doing exactly the same thing as the other 19 are doing. And then one company will come in, a remarkable person with something remarkable and new and differentiated. And then the right temperament. Does this set of human beings in front of us actually love one another? Do they love what they're doing? Can they not wait to get at it? And when we see those characteristics, we'll invest.
Well, thank you. My name is DeGheest. I specialize in changing healthcare, which is clearly needed right now. I've invested in 38 companies over the last 30 years, 8 IPOs, $6 billion in market cap creation, and I run a group called HealthTech Capital, which is an angel group as with industry and venture in the healthcare space. So let's kind of go through the journey. So knock, 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 they come on your door. What's the first impression? And tell me the best and the worst story. In other words, you see that one person there and within 30 seconds you say, oh my God, this is the guy that I need to spend time on. And I will ask you the opposite. It says, why is this guy here? So, Amit, you want to take that one first?
Sure. I would be really careful to characterize it as the worst story because, having been an entrepreneur, I just realized it's a really difficult journey. It's a lot harder than people realize, to really take that plunge. I would say the quote unquote worst story is when I met an entrepreneur and it was just very clear to me that they didn't have conviction around the idea. That they had fallen in love with the idea of starting a company, but hadn't really thought through the rest of it. And I have to say that just starting a company is easy. It takes about an hour. You can go down to City Hall and fill out the forms, but actually building a company is it's really a life mission. And so you have to be really committed. And I think investors can really tell if you're not committed to what you're doing, And so certainly there are entrepreneurs who will pitch me and every few months we'll have a new idea. And, there's no company in the world where it was like an overnight success or it's straight shot. The reality is it's a lot of ups and downs. Even the most successful companies, one of our most successful companies is Slack. We were there the very first day. They were a gaming company. It didn't work out, And obviously it's a huge success today, but there's just a grit and determination that you need to really pursue something. And so I would say that, pivoting is different than just, not having conviction behind your team in the area that you're pursuing. So
do you look at the CEO and the founder as the superstar, or do you look at the team as a whole and how they work with each other?
I think the CEO is obviously the CEO is super important because that's ultimately who's powering the company, but I'm a firm believer that the first, second, third, fourth people are, at least in our society, a little bit underrated. The first person who joins the company, there's a great TED Talk on this, legitimizes a crazy person, right? Because everyone who wants to start a company is somewhat crazy, but it also takes that first, second, third, fourth person to really build a movement. And so, I think to what was said earlier, we look for teams that really like each other and get along, and just because you're good friends doesn't mean that you're going to make great coworkers. I think a great analogy for this is, we all have friends that if you went on a vacation with them, you'd kill them, right? But that doesn't mean you're not good friends. It just means that you don't vacation well together. And that's a very similar kind of thought process I have for working together. It just requires a different type of relationship, an ability to be honest and transparent without taking it personally, with complementary skill sets and whatnot.
So Mike wrote a fantastic blog, about why startups fail. And I highly recommend that you take a look at it on their website. And basically it was wrong time, wrong team, wrong tech, and wrong temperament. Yeah. So let's look at the wrong team and the wrong temperament. What are you looking for and how do you measure that?
Well, we're investing at the very beginning, so there tends not to be a very big team. There's almost always more than one person. And what we're looking for is, what we believe, 90% of what the team tells us when they walk in the door and believes fervently will turn out not to be true. We know it. I don't think I can ever remember a company that...
Only 90%?
Maybe even more, but that actually succeeded on the deck as was presented that first day. We know things are going to go wrong. We know they're going to have to change. So we're looking a lot at the team in front of us going, how are they going to hold up when the engines flame out, when the passengers are screaming in the back of the plane, when there's no money and no customers and everything is horrible? Will they get stronger together or will they start tearing at one another? Are they going in one direction, or do we have two strong personalities here bearing each other's company but actually getting ready to go in two different directions? And there are all kinds of ways to do it, but in terms of the meetings, the best meetings, in my experience, are the ones where the entrepreneurs have asked the most questions. The worst meetings are the ones where the entrepreneurs have done the most unbroken talking. So in an extreme case, sit down and say, great to meet you, tell me a little bit about yourself, and 35 minutes later, I'm still hearing that. and that entrepreneur hasn't learned anything about us, hasn't had a chance to get a conversation going, and hasn't brought maybe the CTO, who's also sitting there looking out the window wondering what he or she is there for, into the conversation, and those meetings tend to be really not particularly productive.
And that's an excellent point. So Steve, I'd like you to put your venture hat on and to say, what are the mistakes that entrepreneurs are making while evaluating a VC? I mean, they're just looking for the money, but there's a lot of other criteria, alignment of the fund, the stage, you know, the partners' personalities. Tell us more from, what should they be looking for? What are the questions they should ask or do their homework?
So think of it from two different standpoints. First is whether there's an alignment between the type and stage of the fund that you're looking to have as your equity partner. And then second, look at the type and experience of the individual VC at that fund with what you're looking for. On the first point, if you're raising money to try to go after a unique play that really does have the potential to be a special breakout type business, you might need a substantial amount of capital, so you're probably looking for a larger fund like ACCEL. If you're looking for something where it's a large market, but you're saying, well, I'm going to get 1%, 2% of that market. A lot of the big funds aren't going to be that interested in that, because if you get a $50, $100 million exit, it just doesn't move the needle for them. Whereas a fund that's $30 or $50 million and they own 20% of your company, they're overjoyed if you sell for $100 million because that returns a meaningful part of their fund. So you need to align the type of business and outcome you're going after with the fund you're going after. Similarly, what stage that fund is at. If they're in their 4th year of their investment cycle, then they only have another 6 years before they should, in theory, give all the money back to their investors. If you're a Series B or Series C round, that makes perfect sense. But if you're doing a seed round, it's probably not a good match, because when you're still building out the business, they're going to be trying to push you to exit the business. So that's on the fund side. On the partner side, there's a big debate in our industry. It's been going on since before I got involved. Should a VC be a prior entrepreneur, or should they be someone who's not a prior entrepreneur? And we've got great examples on both sides. You have Mike Moritz, who is a reporter. You've got Matt Kohler, who's a successful entrepreneur. I tend to think of it in stages. When you're first setting up the business, a lot of the issues you're going to have to deal with are very tactical. So you want someone who's been an entrepreneur before, who's lived through those tactical situations. When you get to sort of the Series A, Series B, you're starting to think a little bit more strategically. What's my right positioning relative to my competitors? You probably want someone who's stepped back a little bit. So either, as an entrepreneur, they were more in a strategic role as opposed to a tactical role, or their historic background is more strategy focused. Then when you're going for your latter stages of funding, when you're looking towards exit, you probably want people who have been in the exit world. So they look more like banker types, which is what you see at firms closer to like an IVP. So you want people who have the experience to say, here's how you position your company for either an IPO or a trade sale. So choose the individual at the firm to be aligned with where you are as a stage of a portfolio company.
So I would just want to add one thing there. Like, as you pick a VC, particularly if it's the first institutional round that you're taking, I would almost think of it as like bringing on a co-founder, right? Because that person is going to be in the trenches with you, and honestly, like almost like extremely hard to remove from your cap table and company. Literally, it's easier to end your marriage than to get rid of your VC partner. You're kind of stuck with us for a long time, as long as you're pursuing the business. And so I think it's super important. I think those were really great points in terms of stages, but you also want to make sure that you're aligned in terms of your ambition level for the company, your ethics and values. You need to make sure it matches with this person, because that is ultimately, when the company is failing or succeeding and you're raising the next round, that's the person you're making that decision with. That's who you're in the trenches with. So you need to make sure that that's the person you would want to start this company with if you could do it again.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right on that point. If you've got a company that is all going guns blazes and going well, you need someone who can step back and say, well, what if? So that at least you're aware if something goes the wrong way. At the same time, if things are going really bad, you want the right person alongside you who can support you, help you get out of those negative spirals, turn the business around. And I think Slack is a great story where you had a business in one direction and the right VC with the right guidance put them in a different direction.
I think it's also, I agree with everything I'm hearing, to be aware of stylistic differences. In our case, everyone in our fund is a former entrepreneur. We've all run companies. Half of us are also former journalists. So we got a little of both sides. And we're pragmatists, and we seek pragmatists, and we're a relatively small fund, so capital efficiency is important. for us. So we tend to deeply honor entrepreneurs who, what we call, live over the store. They're obsessed with their businesses. They know every detail of their businesses. They can quote the unit economics of their businesses in the middle of the night. Other funds will have very different perspectives, might view that pragmatic CEO as not bold enough or not being willing to take big enough risks. And that's a difference in the fund, and you can see it in the portfolios. All those CEOs are out there. You can call them, you can meet them, you can ask them and get a sense of what does this fund care about? What are its tendencies? Am I the kind of person that this other group of people is really going to get along with in the long haul?
So let's expand on that. So, you've gone for the courtship, this is your third or the fourth due diligence meetings, and now you're deciding, am I going to write a check? How do you really check their personality? I'll give you a tip I do. I play foosball with them, I put them with the co-founder, I wipe them out 10-0, and I see how they take it. You have to get them out of their kind of zone of comfort. How do you evaluate the personality characteristics? Because reference check, they all give you good people that are going to say nice things about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if someone gives me reference checks, sure, you're right, they're typically not that helpful. But I think it's our job to know people who know the entrepreneurs, right? And so in a Series A process right now, I've called at least 8 people who know this guy that I know. And so I think part of our job is to make sure that our networks are as expanded, or at least someone in the firm knows someone who knows this entrepreneur. I think it's kind of those back channel references that we really lean on heavily. And typically if the person is from the Valley, it's kind of hard not for us to have someone in common that knows them or has worked with them. I lean heavily towards people who've worked with the entrepreneur before, because I think that's like the closest match for understanding how they're going to be able to handle the situation and vet their experience and just kind of how they behave in a day-to-day work environment.
Mike and Steve, any tips that you're using?
Well, sure. Tips and also maybe some advice. So the best and worst thing some entrepreneurs have done is accepted my request to be friends on Facebook. So they don't sometimes fully realize how much of themselves can be seen on Facebook and everywhere else. And we're geeks, so we're going to be looking and making judgments that way. And also, we, as part of our process, the founding partner in our fund is a practicing Zen Buddhist. You don't see a lot of practicing Zen Buddhist capitalists. So we always try and have companies meet Bill, and sometimes when they meet Bill, his opening line will be this. And insecurities will pour into that space. And so we try really hard to get to know this person as a person. We were the first check to Pinterest. We say often, if you took that plan and gave it to 100 people, 99 of them would fail. It was that person with that plan at that point in time, and the plan wasn't the one he succeeded on, that fought his way through. And that's really what we're looking for.
So let's look at the next step. You've invested in a company there, and how do you build the trust so that when things go wrong, which is over 90% of the time, that you as a team work well together, and what are you looking for? What's the role of the board when the company missed their milestones?
So I think a lot of it depends on why the company is missing its milestones or what's going wrong with the business. If it's something that's out of the control of the team and out of control of the CEO, for example, a new competitor came up well-funded and started really aggressively trying to buy their way into a market, or there's some new regulation or legislation that blindsided everyone, then the board is more cooperative, works with the CEO and tries to find solutions, whether it's pivoting the business or whether it's refinancing the business or otherwise. The bigger problem becomes when there's some sort of issue where it's clear that either the CEO was blindsided or the CEO chose to withhold information from the investing partner that they had because they were either embarrassed or they thought they could solve something without the help of the board. That's where trust starts breaking down. So early disclosure to your investing partner of both good and bad is critical. If something's going wrong where you've lost a senior member of your team, don't wait until the next board meeting and say, oh, by the way, this person's gone. Tell your partner up front, here's the person who's left. let them do an exit interview, understand what's going on, why the person chose to leave. It could be innocuous, or it could be something else fundamental with the business. And either way, they might be able to help you out. Similarly, if you have people who are under threat before they've even left, get the board involved, be able to say, here are the people who are critical to my organization, times here's what the probability is that they're unsatisfied. We have some companies that specifically, outside the board meeting, but in the comp meetings, do a 2x2 matrix where they rate all their key staff on a 1 to 5 matrix. 1 to 5, how important they are to the critical success of the business. 1 to 5, in terms of the probability that they might leave. And then we know exactly where we can help address those issues. So again, transparency is really key. Think of your investing partner as a partner. If you blindside them with something that was in your control, the trust will break down and you'll have a harder time working with them for further financing.
And I think it goes back to the whole, how do you manage the board? I mean, is the board somebody you just say, hey, you know, stay away, take care of me, and that usually doesn't work very well. What are your expectations? We, for example, we ask for operating matrix, like you were saying, like a dashboard of all the key operating metrics of the company there at the beginning of every board meeting, so there's an alignment of what we're going to talk about. What are some of the other things you do to force that trust and transparency?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, you know, when we invest in a company, we're all in. So there's no distinction between the company and us at that point. And so to your point around transparency, I think just realistically in today's world, it's pretty silly if I find out about something 3 months after it happened. I mean, I'm in the Slack of every single company I'm on the board level of, right? And that's kind of a consistent pattern at ACCEL. So we're in there helping tactically, answering questions, communicating with employees, key employees. And I think, you know, I think Steve nails it. I think transparency and really just treating your board as part of the company, right? And at the end of the day, the board's responsibility is to responsibly run the company and guide it towards success. So we're all aligned. Like post-investment, everybody should be super aligned as to where the company is going and how to achieve those results. And so really it's just about understanding what your role is and how, you know, what expectations are set between you and your investor. The other thing is I would have to say is like, be very open and ask for help, right? So if my CEO asks me for something, I'm going to go do it, but I won't necessarily know, I won't be able to read his mind and know that, hey, he needs help here. So I would say just more to the point of transparency, just as much open communication as you can have, or ask for help, or call, or text, or, you know, but I think the days of, you know, showing up with a deck that I've never seen before at a board meeting 3 months from now are kind of gone by the wayside.
So Mike, you work with really early stage at the inception. So how do you help them build the team, you know, because there's lots of holes at that time.
Yeah, exactly. And our fund is rather unusual in that we never take board seats. 320 some investments, no board seats. And we are there to be helpful. And one of the ways we can be helpful is helping these companies understand what building that first board looks like, who they might put on it or shouldn't put on it, what some of the requirements they're going to see as they approach their A round are going to be. And so we manage it through conversation. So we work very hard to let companies know a whole range of ways we might be able to help, through connections, through tech advice, through recruiting, through a sense of what's coming next, because we've been at this a long time. And then we work very hard to respond to incoming. So I agree. We want the entrepreneur to lead us and say, you know what I'm really worried about is this. And then we can respond and be helpful. We never want to try, as non-board members, to manage from the back seat. We want to be responsible and helpful. And we encourage entrepreneurs and believe there's a very strong correlation in telling the truth. Our watchword in the fund is we want entrepreneurs who tell the truth, including to themselves. And so the most honest entrepreneurs who call up and go, it's bad, it's really bad, we didn't expect anything like this, it's horrible. Their team knows that they're being realistic. They're putting us in a position where we understand how we can be helpful, and it makes a huge difference. The entrepreneurs who show up very late in the game, it's all great, It's all great. Oh my God, we're going to crash and we're all going to die. The team is confused. The market's confused. The customers are confused, and we get confused, and we don't know how to help.
So let's ask one of the big elephant question, which is, I'm a young entrepreneur. I've never done this before. I have this great passion. And then you come and says, don't worry, we have the right CEO for you. Do you ever invest in a company where you like the technology, but you know you have to replace the CEO in the short term?
So I'll answer that myself. We've never done that. We've never had a situation where we liked the technology, we liked the market, but we thought this was the wrong team, and we said, hey, we'd love to back you, but here's a CEO that we want to put into the company. Now, we have had a few situations where before looking at investing, we told the company, hey, I want you to think really seriously if you're the right team to do this, and we're doing this as friendly advice, well before we would want to actually go through a due diligence process. But I'm going to say something slightly controversial here. The best thing a venture capitalist can do 95% of the time is get out of the way. Unless they know everything, what's going on with the board, unless they have the information flows, they don't know what the right 5% of the time is where they should get involved. So that's why transparency is so important. But if we're running the business, if we're putting in place the person who's going to be the CEO, or if we're trying to take someone from our partnership and say they're the CEO, we made a fundamental error in our judgment in terms of choosing to back that business.
So if you were the entrepreneur, how do you know the VC wants to invest is not a micromanager? How do you figure this out from their viewpoint?
Ask the other CEOs. Ask the portfolio companies. They're the ones that have actually had the experience. I mean, ask us too. But the companies we've invested in before that we've had years of experience with will be able to tell you what working with us is like as a group and as individuals, and probably your best source.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all there is to it. Just do reference checks on us the way we would do reference checks on you.
So each of you, I mean, we have 1 minute per person there. Give us your best advice, or maybe the worst story, then the hard-learned lessons there, on how to build the right team between you and the entrepreneur.
I think it's just super important to set expectations up front between VC and entrepreneur. I've been on the other side of it where I've been an entrepreneur, I've taken venture funding, and it was just a really bad fit. We had completely different expectations of what we would get out of the relationship than they did. And I see at ACCEL how carefully that work is done in the diligence phase. Being on this side of the table now. We're very clear about the fact, to what Steve said, that we don't, we're not backing ideas, we're not backing markets, we're backing CEOs, we're backing great entrepreneurs, and that's our job, is to partner with the best entrepreneurs and get aligned on their vision, and then set expectations about, like, here's what we can do and here's what we can't do. For example, ACCEL isn't great at helping you hire engineer number 32. This is not what we do. We don't have a huge recruiting function. But what we are great at is we can help you find your VP of sales who's sold into the same enterprises before that you're trying to sell into. We can help you get connected to the 1 or 2 companies that you're trying to make a business deal with. So we try to help and be very clear about, this is what we can offer and this is how we're going to help you. This is what the relationship looks like. But I think it's just super important to just have that set up front.
Steve?
So if you're a great entrepreneur, one of the things that you're going to be really good at is winning people to your side. You're going to be very charismatic and passionate about what you're doing. And similarly, great VP of sales, great employees are also going to be really good at selling themselves. The hardest part is vetting and trying to put the right people together with each other. That's where you should be relying on your venture investors. Because they've seen so many scenarios play out over and over again, they can see how the jigsaw puzzles the puzzle pieces fit together. They can help you say, of these 5 people you're thinking of bringing in, this is the one that fits best in this situation with you as the entrepreneur and also with the team and the strategy you're going after. If you can put the right pieces together, you're going to have much higher probability of success. If you just have a bunch of rock stars who can't work together, as great as they look on paper, the business isn't going to be set up for success.
Mike, last words.
Sure. The weaker entrepreneur won't ask. The middle-of-the-road entrepreneur will ask, what should I do next? And the best entrepreneur will say, here's what I'm going to do next. How can you help me?
Well, thank you for the panelists and sharing their wisdom.